Word on the street is Stellar Blade will take you around 25 to 30 hours to complete. If you intend on doing everything that the game has to offer, it can take anywhere between 30 and 50 hours, which of course reignited the age-old debate on how long should a AAA game be. I always thought the hour per dollar is a poor way to determine value in video games. I personally don't consider that Ubisoft side content, the stuff that's just there to inflate the numbers. I usually don't find that content very engaging. If I had it my way, I much rather spend every single minute of my time enjoying myself rather than just pushing myself through content that I really don't want to do, but I'm doing it just for the sake of feeling like I got my money's worth. And it's because of companies like Ubisoft. We have this trend of arbitrary numbers that are really meaningless until you can actually examine the whole scope of the game and what you'll actually be doing in that game. Like a bag of potato chips that claims to have 30% more than all of the other brands. But what good is that extra 30% if you're not actually enjoying the potato chips? Bullshit marketing. Just like when they trot out all these different special editions of a video game. Star Wars Outlaws, for example. That is supposed to create confidence in you. Oh, it must be a good video game if they have all these different luxurious editions for it. The game must be good if they're charging all that extra money. Which of course is not true. In fact, the more special editions and the more money they're charging for a video game, the more skeptical I become. If you make a quality game, you can sell a ton of DLC. And so sometimes I take that as a company not having much confidence. Therefore, they try to extract as much money as they can from us day one. So back to Stellar Blade. How big should an open world game be? Well, for one, Stellar Blade isn't a true open world game. Sure, it has these wide open areas, but it's more linear than, say, Red Dead Redemption 2. And when you consider that, I think 25 to 30 hours is plenty. So as long as the game is good, of course. But I definitely see where people are coming from when they want more replay value out of their video games. These AAA games aren't cheap, and even though the future of game design looks like it could actually get a bit cheaper, using AI to do a lot of the heavy lifting, and if that is the case, games become cheaper to make, they're not going to wake up one day and decide to charge less money. The business model may change, but for these companies, it's always more. More. I wouldn't mind it as much if the game industry actually felt like a place that was oozing with innovation. Game design in many ways has remained almost unchanged over the past 20 years. I'm talking things like mission design, the actual game loop, what you're doing in the game. And so on the topic of replay value, I would love to see some more innovation there. Because if they can justify you playing the game over and over and over again, the length of the game doesn't matter as much. But as far as I'm concerned, a different ending in itself isn't enough for me to play a game over again, especially if it's a big RPG. I'd rather watch the different endings on YouTube or something and spend my time playing something fresh, something new. To me, one of the biggest appeal of a game, especially an open world game, is the mystery, playing it for the first time and not knowing what to expect. And obviously, when you complete a video game, much of that mystery is gone. However, if the developers spent more time making their games, you could have a more dynamic experience, where your playthrough actually feels different from the last time. Some developers were looking towards procedural generation in an attempt to offer that, but the sad reality is, most of these games we play are almost identical in terms of game design, all the way down to the controls, resulting in a lot of deja vu. In most games, the further you stray away from the main path, the less interesting it becomes. Side missions often feel like a chore. That's because they put the bare minimum effort into these side missions just so they could boast about the game being so many hours. And that's why it feels like a breath of fresh air when we play a game like The Witcher 3. Baldur's Gate 3 is another example, where a lot of the side stuff does feel worth your time, can have a different outcome depending on how you approach them, which results in real replay value, which a lot of these AAA games are missing. I suggest not getting hung up on how many hours a game is supposed to be. Those numbers don't paint the full picture. Let's talk about a couple of things that adds hours to that total average playtime. Collectibles, which from my understanding is usually added at the end of a game, of course to try and inflate the numbers. And usually, the time you spent with these collectibles is just walking from point to point. At least some developers actually put in a puzzle or something. But there's a reason why these collectibles are usually up in a mountain somewhere, hard to reach places, because it takes time for you to get there. It's not a very gratifying experience in my opinion. It's not very rewarding to walk up to something, hold a button down, glance at it for a second, and then never think about it again. It's one thing if we can actually display these collectibles in our housing or whatever, or trade them into a vendor for something else, but it's usually not that involved. The padded content just to get the playtime numbers up usually isn't.